interesting things I've learned, but today I want to zoom in on 4 of what I think to be the most important, especially for leaders. So one of my favorite researchers I've ever met is this guy. His name is Robert Rosenthal. And his work was so interesting that I actually flew out to UC Riverside to spend a couple days with him. When I met Rosenthal, he's 89 years old, and he's still a professor and still doing research at UC Riverside. He's one of the 100 most cited psychology researchers ever, which is probably going to happen if you do it till you're 90, but either way, he's awesome. So I want to take you through the way he explained his research to me, and I think it's a really essential tool to leadership. So I'm sitting in his office, and I go, well, what were some of the first experiments you did? And he goes, well, my first experiment, the one that put me on the map, was in 1958. And we did it with a bunch of rats. So he's at Harvard, and they run this experiment with rats. Or he has a lab that runs experiments on rats. One night, he sneaks into the lab, and all these rats are in cages. And he puts a little sign on half of the cages that says smart rat, and on the other half of the cages, he puts a sign that says dumb rat. They're all the same rats, but half get labeled smart and half get labeled dumb. A group of students comes in, and their job for 10 days is to take care of the rats. So they feed the rats, they handle them in and out of the cage. 10 days go by, they run the rats through a maze, and something weird happens. The smart rats run through the maze way better and way faster than the dumb rats. That's weird. Because obviously these rats can't read, so this isn't about their confidence of I'm a smart rat, and that helps me run through the maze. But someone in this experiment could read, and that was the students. So what they discovered, the big discovery of this first experiment, they call the Rosenthal effect, which is our expectations and our labels of the people we lead can become true. And that's kind of what happened in the experiment. The smart rats did become smarter, but it wasn't because they cheated the experiment. No, the smart rats became smarter because when they looked at the data, they saw that the students actually fed the smart rats more, and they would handle them with more care in and out of the cage. So you take a step back, and this is kind of an interesting dynamic. The label on the cage becomes true. Why? Because the label on the cage changed how the students treated the rats, and then that made the label become true. It's sort of self-fulfilling, but they're creating that outcome. Okay. Rosenthal writes up this first experiment, and they publish it in an academic journal. In the last sentence of his article, he writes a question. He goes, if this happens to rats in my lab, I wonder what happens to students in schools. And so a school principal from San Francisco invites Rosenthal to do this experiment at her school. This is 1961. This would be highly illegal to do this now. So he goes to the school, he gathers all the teachers, and he gives them a presentation. He goes, at my lab, we developed a better IQ test. Our test is better because we can predict academic bloomers. Maybe not the students with the best scores now, but we can predict which students will make the most progress over the course of a year. So they give all the students this exam, they process the results, and then they deliver a list of 20 names to the teachers. They go, here are the bloomers. These are the ones that will make the most progress this year. He comes back a year later, they give the same students the same exam, and the students on the list do way better than the students that are not. The teachers are amazed. They're like, wow, how do you predict a bloomer? How do you figure this out? And he goes, I just gave you 20 random names. So just like the rat study, the students weren't aware of this expectation or label. They didn't know I'm a bloomer or not, but the teachers were. And just like in the rat study, the label becomes true because it changed how the teachers treated the students. When they looked at the data, the 2 big differences they found, the teachers were more likely to support a bloomer if they were struggling. And it kind of makes sense. It's well, we know this student has potential. If they're struggling, we better spend time with them. And they would teach them more and more difficult material. So more opportunities and a little more support, yeah, you're probably gonna see more progress. When I interviewed Rosenthal, he made it clear, it's not like they did one experiment with rats and one experiment with students, and then that was it.
All kinds of other studies were done on all kinds of experimental tasks. And as I said, there's over 500 of those studies, and I've meta-analyzed that.
The Pygmalion effect has been studied in prison classrooms, military training programs, and even the corporate world.
So lots of different skills, lots of different industries, and they see a similar pattern. The expectations that we have about the people we lead can really affect their development. Now, there's a couple things to be clear on. You're going to see more of an effect if we're talking about the expectations of someone who controls the opportunities of others. Like if we're in a group and I don't control your experiences, it doesn't really matter what I think about you. But if I'm in a leadership role as a parent, coach, educator, where I do have an impact on your opportunities, you're going to see more of an effect. The hard part about this research is we feel like we're right. And what I mean by that is, it's kind of a stupid example, but it really illustrates the point. A common expectation in the world of basketball is tall people aren't good at dribbling the basketball. And whether you're a big basketball person or not, you watch basketball and you're like, that's kind of true. Like most tall people, when they get the ball, it's awkward and they dribble it off their toe. If you take a step back and go, okay, why is that though? Well, it's not because there's like a law of physics that if you're over 6'3", you can't do this. Most tall people can't dribble because that's kind of the expectation. And you rewind back to 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. Most coaches are operating under that assumption. And what do we do with the tall players? Go stand by the hoop and get rebounds. Tall players can't dribble. So we're sort of making this become true because we're limiting the reps and opportunities for those players. And then again, the trap is we're playing in the game, the tall player gets the ball and dribbles it off their toe, and we're like, yep, tall players can't dribble. But what we're not really recognizing is we're sort of limiting their reps and opportunities. Now, I'm not saying the tallest player on the team is going to be the best at dribbling the basketball in one practice or even one season. But the argument is they're going to be a lot better if they're allowed to practice the skill than if they're put in the paint and never allowed to dribble. That's the whole argument here. Like a pattern you see in most research is in the experiment you see a big effect size. And most of the time in the real world, the effect size is smaller. This is flipped. This is definitely flipped. And there's two big reasons. One, when they do these experiments, they never use negative labels when they do these experiments with humans. Like the rat study was a positive and negative label. With me there, it's like smart and dumb. When they do it with humans, it's a positive label, like bloomer or nothing at all. Well, in the real world, we have both positive and negative expectations. That creates more of a gap. When they do these experiments with humans, they never share the expectation with the students or with the subjects. In the real world, we usually do. I might believe or think that you're not a leader, not a math person, or can't dribble. Usually we tell the person that. And when we tell the person that, that can become kind of a double-edged sword. Like if they believe they can't dribble or they're not a leader or not a math person, they're probably going to limit their reps as well. Now there's two things getting in the way of action in practice that can help them get better. So the question is, what do we do with this information? There's lots and lots of studies, the research is interesting, but what does it mean for people like us? We don't care about like publishing research papers. We want to be better leaders for the people around us. How do we apply this? Going into the interview with Rosenthal, I thought I already knew that answer. I just wanted him to say it on camera. Like going into the interview, I was like, this is simple. If he's saying our expectations kind of become true, Well, we should just raise them up and have higher expectations. Like if I'm a math teacher, it's like, yep, everyone in my class can get a 100% this semester. If I'm a basketball coach, we can all hit 40% from 3. If I'm a baseball coach, we can all bat 300. I say that out loud to Rosenthal, and he just starts laughing at me, and he goes, no, that's not how you should apply this. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter if you're a math teacher or basketball coach, just because you provide good support and a good environment for everyone in the group, that doesn't guarantee A's across the board. Like people go at different speeds, it's gonna take time. So he goes, if you're thinking about an expectation, setting an expectation or a label to use, don't attach a number to the label. So it's not 100%, 40%, batting 300. Don't attach an outcome to the label. He goes, the label you should use is learner. It's the most important word ever. You might be better at math than me, but we can both get better at math. You might be better at dribbling a basketball than me, but we can both improve on that skill because we're both learners. That word kind of holds us accountable. Like as a leader, if I truly believe that the people around me are learners, that they can grow, it's really hard to stick people in boxes. Now, treating people as a learner does not mean we're fake. Like we can live in reality here. Treating you as a learner is not me saying, you're the best three-point shooter on the team, if that's not the case. Treating you as a learner is saying, look, you know and I know you're not the best three-point shooter on the team, but that's a skill that you can get better at through practice, and I'm here to help. Like that's living in reality and treating you as a learner. It's dead simple, but really, really important. And the cool thing about that word is that there's a ton of research that supports it. So this is Michael Merzenich. In the world of like neuroscience, like the study of the brain, he is one of the most important researchers. He's been studying learning in brains since 1971. And here's a clip from the interview that I did with Dr. Merzenich.
I was for many years a professor at the University of California in San Francisco. And we did experiments, other scientists had also done experiments earlier and in parallel, that showed that the brain in fact was massively plastic at an older age. At any age, on any ability, and I could improve it. It turns out that plasticity in the brain is its big trick. It's the main thing that makes it so fabulous. Absolutely. Everyone has the capacity to be better at virtually everything. With that understanding, miracles can occur in your capacity to understand or do complicated things that you never thought you'd be able to do. You are designed to be continuously improvable. Nobody's defined what their limits are. I can tell you whatever you think your limits are, you're wrong. You could be better next week. A little bit, but in a year you could be a lot better at almost anything that matters to you.
That video is awesome because that's not someone trying to inspire us. That's like not meant to be motivational. That's a guy that's been studying brains since 1970. And for someone like that to say the things he said, it should carry some weight. And that part at the end is the best, where he's like, yeah, we can all get better at stuff. Like if it's a skill, you can definitely get better at it. He's not saying we're all gonna be the best at everything. He's not saying we can all do anything, but he's saying, yeah, if it's a skill and you practice it, you can get much better than you think. So if you go back to that word learner, essentially what he's saying is we're all capable of growth. In other words, we are all learners. And so I think tool number one for tonight is a simple shift. And it's simply looking at the people around us as learners and treating them accordingly. And once again, this doesn't mean we're fake. We're not telling everyone they're the best at everything. Of course, the people we lead and work with have different strengths and weaknesses. We can talk about those. That's fine, as long as we're attaching learner on top. This is one of the topics that the pro sports teams that I work with are using the most. And I love the way that they're applying it. Like, especially at the Major League Baseball level, there are labels roles, there's positions, they have scouting reports, there's all sorts of strengths and weaknesses, and at the top every time is every player is a learner, which means they can get better at stuff. Not that they're going to be the best at everything, but they can get better at stuff. That's tool number one. Tool number two. If we're thinking about learning and performance, I think you would probably agree with me on this one. Stress, fear, and discomfort can get in the way of good learning and good performance. Another way to say that would be when we're feeling uncomfortable, when we're feeling afraid, when our athletes are feeling really stressed, we usually don't perform at our best and we usually don't learn at our best. And a question that I like to ask groups during a workshop is like, okay, think about a time that fear has robbed you of an opportunity to grow. And if you thought about that question for longer than 10 seconds, you could come up with a few answers. And if you thought about that question for 20 minutes, you could come up with 150 answers. And if you thought about that question for an hour, you could come up with 1,000 answers, because this is something that happens to everybody all the time. Fear, stress, and discomfort getting in the way of learning opportunities. Could be a small thing like had a question, felt weird, didn't ask it. That's small, but that's discomfort robbing us of that moment of growth. Could be much bigger. I wanted to apply for this position, but I felt weird about it, and then I didn't. That's fear robbing us of an opportunity to grow. Every human I've ever worked with, when given enough time, can think about times in their life that this has happened. From Olympic athletes down to kindergarten students, this is something that we all have to deal with. The question is, how do we fix that, especially as leaders? So I found this awesome researcher named Allison Wood Brooks, and she actually created a survey that asked people that question. We're going to do this survey together right now. You don't have to share your answer, but just think about what it might be. So she goes, okay, at your workplace, you are presented a big challenge. This challenge freaks you out, stresses you out, makes you feel weird and uncomfortable. What's the best advice to give yourself or someone else in that moment? And so you can even think about that through the leadership lens. Someone we're working with is really stressed when they're confronted with a challenge or change. What's the best advice to give that person in that moment? So she sends this survey out to thousands and thousands of people, and they start to collect the responses. What they found is over 90% of the responses, when they tally them up, over 90% of the responses say something like, calm down, don't worry, don't be afraid, it's no big deal. By far and away, if you made a pie chart of the responses, that's the biggest slice. And there's 100 different ways of saying those things. But calm down, don't worry, don't be afraid, be fearless, it's no big deal, was the number one. Everyone in this room has said those things before. Everyone in this room has heard those things before. And honestly, that strategy on paper makes a ton of sense. It makes sense because of what I said 90 seconds ago. I was like, fear, stress, and discomfort hold a lot of power over us. Makes sense if we want to learn better, perform better, we should try to get rid of or minimize those feelings. What we're going to go through for the next couple minutes is the research that shows that is the wrong approach. As far as topics that I've learned about learning, this is the one that's helped me the most. It's not even close. What the actual science says about getting better at dealing with discomfort. For this topic, I hit the lottery. I probably interviewed the 7 best researchers on Earth who study this. And we're going to go through their experiments. And these experiments will show us how this works, but most importantly, they are going to show you how to put this into practice starting today. This is my favorite topic because it's great for individuals, but it's an awesome tool to have in your pocket as a leader, because the truth is, the people around us, they freak out all the time. And if we can help them deal with that discomfort more effectively, that's beneficial. So the first study is by this guy named Jeremy Jameson, and he did it at Harvard. We actually shared this with the students today, but I'm going to zip through it because it's important. 2 groups of students at Harvard. They're making each one of these groups do the math section of the practice GRE. So this is a really difficult exam. Group 1, control group. They give you the exam, you get no special training or instructions, it's just like, here you go, finish this. And group 1 scores a 684 out of 800. They give the same exam to group 2, but on top of their exam is a paragraph of instructions. And this paragraph teaches you to what some of the researchers call reappraise the stress. Reappraise the stress is just a fancy way of saying change how you think about the discomfort itself. So the paragraph goes, hey, feeling nervous before you take an exam is human, is normal, is expected. Most people get nervous when they do stuff like this. It's a sign that you care, and it's your body getting ready for the challenge. So it didn't tell them, like, don't be nervous. It didn't tell them it's fun to be nervous. In a way, it gave them permission to be nervous. It was like, yeah, this is normal. This is okay. They score a 739. Like, that's a big boost in performance coming from a paragraph. The wild thing is, 3 months go by, and all the students in the study take the real GRE, the real one. They report their scores back, and a similar gap remained. This was one study, one day, one paragraph, and 3 months later, the students that read the paragraph do better on the real exam. And this is illustrating an important point. If you can make a shift in our mindset towards the way we think about discomfort, that's useful down the road. It's not just like, yeah, this will help you do a little bit better on one exam and then it's done. It's like, no, this is helping us in how we deal with stressful situations years down the road. Jeremy told me about a study they did with first-year college students. 2 years later, the students that went through that short intervention are doing better in college than the students that didn't. There's studies about people in the corporate world, how making this shift is helping with their work performance, skill development, and even health. My favorite study was done at Harvard Business School. This one is a little bit different than what Jeremy looked at. So Jeremy, our last guy, he was looking at reappraising stress compared to doing nothing. Allison wanted to look at reappraising stress compared to trying to suppress it, which is what we usually do. So she picks 3 things that freak people out a lot: public speaking, math tests, singing. And they put the students through the 3 activities. There's 3 groups of students that do it. So group 1, this is our suppression group. Before you do your activity, an experimenter comes up to you and goes, hey, calm down, don't be afraid. So seemingly helpful advice. Stuff that we've all said before. Calm down, don't be afraid. Group 2 is told nothing at all. And then group 3 is the reappraisal group. Hey, this is human, this is expected. Most people get nervous when they do stuff like this. In each 3 of the activities, group 1 does the worst, group 3 does the best, and there's a huge gap between the 2. Group 2, their scores don't fall perfectly in the middle. Group 2, their scores are really close to group 1. Why? How come group 2, who's told nothing at all, how come their scores are actually closer to group 1? Any guesses? It's kind of tricky, but when it clicks, it'll make sense.
That's what we tell ourselves.
100%. Probably most of group 2, you're giving yourselves the same instructions that they hear because that's what we think we should do. And that is what we do. Like before a big game, a big free throw, an exam, a presentation, even a first date, we're nervous. What do we usually tell ourselves? Calm down, don't worry, don't be afraid. That's what we say. The singing part of the experiment really paints the picture. So here's how they set it up. You go into a small room, there's a few people sitting at a table, a Nintendo Wii is hooked to a TV. You stand in front of the people and you have to sing "Don't Stop Believing" to them. No alcohol involved either. The group that was told, calm down, don't be afraid. So group 1, they score a 53% on the song. And that's like an objective score. The game scores your singing accuracy. Group 3, 81% on the song. That's a huge boost in performance coming from a little shift in how they talk about the discomfort. The wild thing is, when they do experiments like this, they can measure all sorts of stuff. They're measuring heart rate, blood pressure, hormones. In this one, they even gave like a survey to the students that measured how nervous they were during the task. And what they find time and time and time again, there's no big difference between any of the groups. Everybody's heart rate and blood pressure spikes when they're doing the public speaking task and singing and the math test. Everyone reports similar levels of nerves and anxiety, which means students in group 1 and 2 and 3 all kind of feel the same. And that is the key with this topic. The truth about tough emotions, fear, stress, nerves, anxiety. We actually don't have too much control over exactly how we feel in every moment of our life. You can learn to regulate emotions, but they're not switches you just turn on and turn off. That would be nice, but that's not how they work. Hey, stop being nervous. Okay, it's not how it works. You take the power back from these emotions, not by fighting and suppressing and denying them. You actually take the power back through understanding and accepting them. And the proof is, put yourself into the shoes of group 1. Group 1 who's told, hey, calm down, don't be afraid. But then they're put into a situation that's designed to make them feel uncomfortable. So they're told, don't feel, but now I'm in the room and I'm feeling. How am I going to think about those feelings? Well, most likely I think that I'm doing something wrong. I shouldn't be nervous, but I am, which means there's something wrong with me, or I am doing something wrong. But then you compare that to group 3, who's in the same room, singing the same song to the same judges, and literally feeling the same as them. Heart rate, blood pressure, hormones, everything. But because they're reminded, like, yeah, you're probably going to be nervous. It's not fun to be nervous, but you're going to be, and that's okay. They can turn their attention to the task and not fighting this losing battle of stop being nervous. One of the researchers that I interviewed, her name's Susan David. We're going to send you like a notes packet with all like links to good books and stuff about all this stuff. But Susan David taught me there's a difference between type 1 emotions and type 2 emotions. She goes, type 1 emotions are how people feel in response to a situation. So you could think of a type 1 emotion of like how you feel before a big game, how you feel if you lose something you love, how you feel if you fail a math test, how you feel before the exam. Those are all emotions in response to a situation. She goes, type 2 emotions are our feelings about our feelings, and those are the ones that cause problems. If you kind of think about what that means, it's our feelings about our feelings. And as soon as she taught me that, so many dots connected for me. I remember when I was younger, when I was first starting to do these talks, I would get really, really nervous every time. So I had experienced type 1 emotion. But I didn't know about this stuff, and every time I was nervous, I would slide into this type 2 spiral of freaking out that I was freaking out. And it's kind of easy to see how I got there. I'm nervous, it's about to be a big talk, I think that it's bad to be nervous, or I think that the fact that I'm nervous means I'm doing something wrong. It's like, dang, I didn't practice enough, didn't prepare enough, or I'm too young to do this, or not smart enough to do this. Because all of it's working under this assumption of I'm doing something wrong because I'm nervous. And in a way, that type 2 doubles down on the nerves. So the more we try to suppress it and fight it, the stronger it gets. Since the day that I learned about this stuff, it's helped me so much. I've done 1,000 talks now. And if I'm being 100% honest with you, I still get nervous every time. I am nervous right now. I was nervous when you were coming in. I was nervous during the intro. The nerves haven't really gone anywhere. But now I know that I feel weird right now because I really, really care how this goes. I really care how this goes. And I also feel weird right now because we don't know exactly how this is going to go. So like a simple formula that I hope you never forget, and it's going to be in the notes packet really, really big. Caring plus uncertainty equals discomfort every time. Caring plus uncertainty equals discomfort every time. And so with that formula, you see, it's actually pretty simple to never be uncomfortable. It's easy. Don't care about stuff. And don't do things that involve uncertainty, and you're gonna feel great. But if we wanna be effective leaders, if we wanna learn, if we wanna get better at stuff, be better teammates, better coaches, we have to do things that involve uncertainty. We have to. And we're probably gonna care about those things, which means we're gonna feel uncomfortable. And with that formula, you see how valuable this research is for athletes, because if you think about it, that's the nature of sports. Uncertainty, what is that? We don't know what's going to happen. We might win, we might not, I might make this shot, I might not. That's uncertainty. Do we care when we play sports? Yes, we do. Which means we're gonna feel uncomfortable. And so the idea is, understanding that we can't remove the discomfort, but we can get much better at dealing with that. And you do that by giving yourself and the people around you permission and reminders that it's okay. So if you only remember one thing from this segment, it's simple. Feeling weird before a big game or a presentation or a tough conversation, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It doesn't mean you're not ready. It means you're a human. That's the human response to things that take us out of our comfort zone. Like, it's called a comfort zone for a reason. If you're out of it, it's not comfortable. You can't remove the discomfort, but you change the way it affects you by changing the way you think about it. And like I said, this is a fantastic tool to have in your pocket as a leader. And when you're thinking about how to apply this, don't overcomplicate it. The studies show you the way. Like, in those experiments, they didn't sit the students down and do a 2-hour lecture about emotions. In these experiments, it was like 7 seconds of instructions, like, hey, it's not fun to be nervous, but it's okay. It means you care, and it's your body getting ready for a challenge. Like, simple, and you can say that in a bunch of different ways. So reminding people that it's normal to be nervous is a great application of this. Other leaders, when the time is right, you can find space or opportunities to share times in your life that you were nervous. Like, hey, I remember before a big game or a big exam, I would get nervous. And by sharing that, you're kind of reminding people that it's okay and normal. My favorite example is Karch Karai. He's the head coach of the U.S. women's volleyball team, and I do a lot of work with them. At the Olympics, I have literally seen him call a timeout. This happened at the Olympics in Japan, Final Four match. Whoever wins gets to go play for the gold medal. He calls a timeout, everyone's in the huddle, and he looks around and he goes, I know you're kind of freaking out right now, because so am I. There's a million people watching this match. We spent 4 years to get here. We really, really, really care how this goes. And then he goes, we might win and we might not, but I hope you're feeling something. And it's awesome because when he said that, everyone does chill out a bit. It's like caring and uncertainty. It's the Olympics. Of course we care. There's uncertainty. We don't know if we're going to beat them or not. And as soon as you do that, everyone can kind of turn their attention to playing the game and then not fighting the losing battle of, uh-oh, I'm nervous, I have to stop being nervous, uh-oh, no matter what I do, I can't stop, I'm doing something wrong, and it's just a spiral of freaking out about freaking out. So when we change the focus, we get better at dealing with the discomfort. A nice shift to make. And there's all sorts of different ways we can use this. We'll give you more materials in the notes packet. The third tool is a simple challenge. And I'm going to show you why it's important as we go through this, but it's very, very simple. One of the most important things you can do as a leader is to take your own learning seriously. And it's not rocket science. What that means is every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or once a month, taking 45 seconds and going, what's a skill that would make me a little bit better at what I do, and how can I practice this skill a little bit more? And taking the time to do that might be one of the most important things you can do, not only for your own learning and development, but also for the people you lead and work with. And I'm going to show you why, but we're going to get there in a second. Before we do that, I want to bring back Michael Merznick one more time.
Some people are slow learners, right? They struggle. But guess what? The machinery that controls learning is plastic. You can improve it. If we take people and we train them in a certain way that exercises the machinery that controls changing the brain, and they learn faster. Of course they do. And what they have to understand is that there can be a pretty long progression. It takes effort. It takes a focus of attention. Conditions have to be right to change the brain, right? It's not free. And the magic is that once you get into a learning mode, once you're really trying to improve yourself on a regular basis and acquiring new skills and improving whatever is important to you, you actually improve the machinery that controls learning for everything you're trying to do. So it's a really good idea to get into a learning mode.
So every time we try to practice something new, not only are we going to get a little bit better at it, of course we will, but the research is now showing that your brain actually gets better at learning as you go through that process. And think about the way that can snowball. If we're starting to stack new skills, that's helpful. And every time we're stacking new skills, we get better at getting better. So like I said, one of the most important things we could do is just be more intentional with our learning. Now the cool part about learning, especially for adults, is like if I made each one of you right now list like, hey, what are like 10 useful skills that would make you better? And you all wrote down 10 things. Most of those skills, to get better at them, it's not about staying up till midnight every night practicing the skill in your living room. Because most of the skills that you would write down are things that you get to practice day in and day out without adding more to your plate. So sometimes like a talk like this feels like a lot. It's like, yo, we're dealing with so many challenges, we're dealing with like parents and all sorts of stuff. And then Trevor comes in and is like, yeah, great. Can you also spend time learning stuff? And it's like, a lot. The cool thing about learning as an adult is, like I said, the stuff you would write down on that list are things like getting better at giving feedback, receiving feedback, being more organized, whatever it may be. And so part of being a great learner, especially as an adult, is understanding we have opportunities and reps to practice these skills day in and day out. And when we're simply more intentional about those opportunities, we're getting more from the situation, we're getting better at the skill. This is a tactic that I took from the US volleyball team. So leading up to the Olympics in Japan, so last round of the Olympics, every 2 weeks, every player, every coach goes to this huge whiteboard in their training facility. They call it Declaration Day. Every player, every coach writes down a skill that they want to be intentional about building for those 2 weeks. Then they still do the same drills they were already going to do, the same exercises they were already going to do, the same scrimmages they were already going to do. They didn't change a thing. But what they found is, by writing something down, the players are now getting more value from the drills and practices they are already going to do. And I love the 2-week time constraint. Like, cool, what's next? Cool, what's next? And I also love that the coaches participated too. That sends a powerful signal. When I talked to Cart, she goes, Declaration Day was by far the most important thing we did for individual skill development leading up to the Olympics. But then he also goes, it was the most important thing we did for the learning environment as a whole. That there was something about it that created a better learning climate for everyone in the gym. What he didn't know is there's actually some science that shows why that is. Which brings us to the third topic.
Well, Google.
Sorry.
for more than 4 years now to figure out exactly how to best put together successful teams. The results so far are fascinating.
So in 2014, Google does this awesome internal experiment. They go, we have a lot of teams that work here, and we have a lot of information about the people who are on the teams. Let's compare those two sets of data. So first, they find the most effective teams in the company. And they do this with all sorts of different strategies. So they'll interview the team members, interview the team leader, they hire people to observe the teams, and then they have the numbers associated with the team. If it's a sales team, they know their sales numbers. So now they isolate the best teams at Google. Then they start to analyze the traits of the team members. So they look at everything you could imagine. They looked at age, personality type, skill sets, where the people went to school, the type of the degree that they have. So you see what they're looking for is, what is the secret formula that creates the best teams? Is it a mix of young people, old people, introverts, extroverts, this skill, that skill? For 3.5 years, they analyzed the data and run the numbers, and they found nothing. There was no magic formula that strongly predicted the most successful teams. They almost give up on the experiment, but then they stumbled upon the work of this researcher from Harvard named Amy Edmondson. Amy Edmondson didn't invent this term called psychological safety, but she's sort of on the cutting edge of what it is and how it plays out in different groups. And through years and years of work, Amy and her team created this little survey that you can give to a group of people, and it measures the level of psychological safety on that team. Google takes her survey, they give it to all their people, everything falls into place. It wasn't about the individual traits of the people on the team, it's how the team interacts. Teams that were scoring higher in that were interacting better, making more money, learning more. On all those measures, the teams that scored higher in that were outperforming the teams that scored lower. And it wasn't even close.
So what we learned is that there are a few common themes that really separate the most effective teams at Google from the rest. But by far, the most important thing is a sense of psychological safety on the team.
I'm Amy Edmondson, and I'm a professor at Harvard Business School. I have been doing research broadly in the field of leadership and organizational behavior for a long time. Basically, my interest, like yours, was learning, and I thought if you're going to be able to learn, you got to learn from mistakes. You've got to be able to speak up. You've got to ask for help. If you're going to be able to learn, you've got to feel psychologically safe.
Amy is awesome. The interview that I did with her went so well that we made a whole video about this. We're gonna link it in the resources we send you. But I wanna zip through some of her work quickly now and just try to nail a few big ideas. What psychological safety is, why it matters, and then how you and I can kind of build it. If we're talking about what it is, it's like a feeling that on this team, I can be myself, I can ask questions, I can ask for help, I can mess up. It's not that I'm trying to mess up, but I feel like it's okay if I stumble, people have my back here. Whether you're familiar with this term or not, you've probably been in a situation where you felt like that before. With even more certainty, I can say everyone in this room has been in situations where we didn't feel like that before. A misconception around psychological safety is, sometimes people hear that word and they think of it as lowering standards, about being fake nice, or ignoring problems. It's the opposite. The teams that do this the best give more honest feedback, have higher standards. They turn towards problems, not brushing them under the rug.
Are you asking me to relax our standards? And in my view, it's, again, it's almost exactly the opposite there too, because it's, my argument would be, in order to achieve high standards, you need psychological safety. You need people to speak up when they're not sure. You need people to take risks that are smart, you know, that they've thought about, oh, this might work. It's like the soil. Soil has to be healthy soil.
When we collaborated on the video, she sent me like 40 different studies that they've done over the decades that shows why this matters. I don't need to go through 40 studies with you. Like, to summarize it shortly, it's saying this is by far one of the strongest predictors of better group learning. And if you think about it, if the group is learning better, they're probably going to achieve better outcomes. So it also predicts performance. On the video, we go through some of those experiments. What I want to touch on now is like, okay, we kind of know what it is. I hope you're trusting me in that it matters. The question is, how do you build it? Now, there's all sorts of things you can do to build safety. And she wrote a whole book about it. But the one that I think is the easiest to understand, but also the most effective, modeling builds psychological safety. Modeling a little bit of vulnerability is one of the easiest, most effective ways to build it. And once you know like what that means, you're gonna see this every day of your life. This happens at the end of most meetings. This happens at the end of most workshops I give. Last week, I did a 7-hour workshop with a group of like 250 people. At the end of the workshop, we go, does anyone have a question? Crickets, nothing. 5 seconds go by, someone raises their hand. What happened next? 20 people raise their hand. That's this. It's all human nature. One person being kind of vulnerable, kind of brave, and raising their hand instantly creates a little bit more safety in the room where other people can raise their hand and take the risk. And this is so simple, but it's, as a leader, if I'm walking the walk, I instantly create a better learning environment for the people I lead. Examples. There's a school I work with in Kansas City. It's a middle school. And every year, they do this awesome project. They call it the Anti-Talent Show. So every teacher, every student at the middle school has to pick something they can't do. They all get to practice it for 2 weeks. They hold the Anti-Talent Show. And it's awesome, like the students learn to juggle or skateboard or recite poetry. No one masters their skill in 2 weeks, but they all get better at it. So I visit the school one year after they do the project. I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of 7th graders, and I asked them what their favorite part of the project was. One student raised her hand and she goes, the best part of the Anti-Talent Show is that I got to see my teacher struggle, and that helped me understand it's okay for me to struggle too. That's this. So modeling wasn't just the teacher showing the student, this is how to ride a skateboard. What was the teacher modeling? The learning process itself, like the willingness to try something new, to struggle a little bit, to make some mistakes, and that creates a safer environment for the players or the students to do the same. Karch, the US coach. I've been going out and working with them since like 2015. And one thing that he's done throughout the years is he's always setting up one-on-one meetings with his players. And every time he meets one-on-one with a player, he ends the meeting with the same question. He looks the player in the eye and he goes, how can I be better for you? And for years he was doing this, and I would watch, and it would lead to some good conversations and good feedback. But what I didn't realize until I learned about this stuff is like, yo, what he's really doing by asking that question, he's modeling. Like, imagine you play for him, and every time he meets with you, he's asking you for feedback. Hey, how can I be better for you? How can I be better for you? It's now safer for you to ask him for feedback someday. Like I said, this is human nature and it's not rocket science. It's what are the actions that I want to see more of from the people around me? How can I put some of those on display? Do I want my people asking lots of questions? I should be asking lots of questions. Do I want my people asking for feedback? I should be asking for feedback. Do I want my people to spend more time in learner mode, learning stuff? I need to be in learner mode and learning stuff. It's simple. And if you go back to Declaration Day, They created psychological safety. They didn't even know what psychological safety was. But that was the magic of Declaration Day. Every coach, every player is learning something new. And that creates more psychological safety in the gym. And as we know, psychological safety is important. So we kind of go back to when we take our learning seriously, not only are you getting better at skills, but that, in a way, is you modeling for the people around you, and that helps the environment. I think we have time for one more tool. We do, yes. This is a new one, never really taught this to anyone or shared this with anyone, so I'm excited. The final tool of the night, and we'll go real fast through it. So, I found this researcher from Harvard Business School named Ting Zheng, and she's really young, no one's ever heard about her, but I interviewed her and I can't stop thinking about her work. She studies this thing that she calls the curse of expertise, and I think it should be essential for every leader to know about it. So I'm going to play some of the clips from the interview. This will only take like 4 minutes to go through, but I think it's going to be really cool.
Hi, my name is Ting Zhang, and I'm an assistant professor at the Harvard Business School. So the curse of expertise happens when the very knowledge and skills that make someone an expert actually become a liability. A lot of the work that I've been doing looks at how the curse of expertise impacts the ways in which experts actually can coach or advise or teach novices. And one of the main barriers to this process is experts' ability to retrieve their understanding of how novices are thinking and feeling as they're engaging in this learning process.
So the idea with the curse of expertise is, as we learn more stuff and get better at things and gain more knowledge, that's great for us. But sometimes it can create issues when we're working with people that are not at that level. And if you think about it, that's what coaching is in a nutshell. That's what teaching is. I know a lot about this thing and I'm teaching someone who doesn't know as much as me. So when she sends me this research on the topic, some patterns start to come up. One, experts have a really hard time predicting how hard something will be for a novice, for someone who's just learning. Experts have a really hard time predicting how long something takes for someone who's a novice. And this creates what she kind of calls an empathy gap, where we just like forget what it's like to be new. And so then it affects the way that we communicate with and coach and lead the people that are not at our level. And once you understand what this is, you do see it everywhere. So last winter, I had to wake up at like 4 a.m. and drive through a blizzard through the middle of Iowa to this school for a workshop. And I get there, it's like 7 a.m., I'm in the parking lot and I'm freezing cold and there's a blizzard and I have no idea where to go. I call the people that brought me in, I'm like, yo, I'm freezing, where do I go? And they go to the north door. I don't know what north is. I've never been to your town. That's a perfect example of this. For them, of course north makes sense. They've spent 20 years living here. I've never been here. And so it's terrible communication on their part, but you see they forget what it's like to be new. I've recognized so many times with like my grandma and parents, they come to me with technology questions and I'm like, it's super easy, just do this, boop, boop, boop. It's like terrible communication once again. Not good advice, not good feedback, because I forget what it's like to not be really, really comfortable with technology. Another common example, you see a lot of the curse of expertise in sports. Most of the time, really, really good players are not the best coaches. Especially the higher you go. Especially the higher you go. Why? Because they forget what it's like to struggle. They forget what it's like to not be good at this thing. And the advice they give and the coaching and the feedback is not that effective. So my favorite thing, first of all, I do want to be clear. We are not saying every expert is terrible at working with novices. But what we are saying is, if you're having trouble communicating with someone who's not at your level, that's probably one of the reasons why. So my favorite thing about Ting, she doesn't just research this problem, Her research is also focused on the solution. How do you avoid falling into this trap? She's done a bunch of experiments, but I'm going to leave you with one.
What I've been doing is looking at, well, how can we help experts rediscover this beginner's mind that's so critical for being able to explain things to novices in a way that a novice would understand. We conducted a study where we had expert guitarists do one of two things. In one condition, it was business as usual. Experts were asked to just play as they would on their guitar normally. In another condition, we asked them to flip the guitar around and play with their non-dominant hand. And the idea here was to get them to understand how awkward it is to hold the guitar for the first time, and understand how it feels to start playing music and realize that the sounds that are coming out of the guitar are not aligned with one's intentions.
So all expert guitar players, they each play for a couple minutes. We're gonna call one group plays like normally, and we'll call this other group the guitar flippers. You play with your offhand. 2 minutes. After you play for 2 minutes, all the experts watch footage of people just learning the guitar. So they watch the video footage, and they have to type up coaching and feedback for the person learning. Then Ting and her team analyze the quality of the feedback, and then they interview the people who are learning the guitar and ask them about, how did you feel when you received this feedback? Did you find it useful? Here's what they found.
Experts who engaged in this rediscovery process were much more concrete in the advice that they gave. That is, they told novices, instead of things like, make sure to play more clearly, they would explain how to play more clearly. They would say things like, make sure to rotate your arm more so that you clear the strings and can produce a clearer sound. Additionally, experts who engaged in this process of rediscovery were also more supportive. They would say things that were more positive, like, keep going. It's really hard to learn for the first time, but continue practicing and you'll eventually get better over time. So this combination of more useful content and greater support actually made the advice more helpful from the novice's perspective, and novices were actually more open and receptive to taking these experts' advice. What we argue is that actually engaging in this process of rediscovering a beginner's mind is really helpful for experts, not only in terms of overcoming the curse of expertise for themselves, but it has consequences for how the novices around them who are learning from them can actually absorb the content that they're sharing.
So the guitar flippers give better feedback, more detailed feedback, more supportive feedback, and then that feedback was perceived to be of higher quality from the novices. They also, another thing that they measured is that the guitar flippers, they see more promise and potential in the player that they're watching. Why do all those things happen? Because by flipping the guitar, they're reminded, like, look, you're not going to be really good when you first start. It is kind of frustrating. And so by experiencing that, they were reminded of what it probably feels like to be the novice who's just learning, and then the quality of the coaching was much better. So what does this mean for you and I? I'm not saying you need to go play a guitar upside down before you interact with people, but it goes back to learner mode. The challenge that we gave you 15 minutes ago, we said, one of the most important things you can do as a leader is put yourself into learner mode. Spend time thinking about and building skills that matter to you. When we do that, not only do you build psychological safety like we just showed, but when we do that, that's our form of flipping the guitar. And now we're in a better position to give advice and coach and support the people around us. I broke every presentation rule in this last hour. Usually it's good to focus on like one topic and go really in depth. We just did like 5 different things. But if you take a step back, all these dots kind of connect. So the big idea with the first topic was we need to change the label and look at the people around us as learners and treat them accordingly. The big idea with the second topic is we need to make a little shift in the way we think and talk about discomfort. Simple shift. Then the challenge that I gave you was, hey, can you spend a little bit more time thinking about practicing some new skills, getting into learner mode? The final two, if you think about it, those are just byproducts of this. Because if you're spending time in learner mode, you're modeling, that builds this. If you're spending time in learner mode, that's like flipping the guitar, that avoids this. You don't even need to think about these two things ever again. If you do that, these kind of take care of themselves. So again, I know I threw a lot at you. We're gonna send you the notes packet, and for most of these topics, we have videos and podcasts that we've done, and you can hear more from the researchers. Before you head out, I just want to say thank you. Like, you could have been so many different places tonight, and I know, like, sitting in plastic bleachers at night when you're it's like cold outside, the Ravens are playing, there's all sorts of stuff happening. And to sit here and listen to some bald guy talk about psychological safety, the curse of expertise, and stress, it's like not the most exciting thing. It means a ton that you showed up, and I could see kind of the curiosity in your faces as we were going through this. It's awesome. That says a ton about you. It was an honor to get to like spend time in the communities today and like teach some of this stuff to the kids. That's my email. If you need anything in the world, you can email me. And then we're gonna send out, like I said, the notes packet, links to the videos, the podcast. It's all free. None of this is for sale at all. We're gonna give it all for free to you so you can use it if you're interested. If you have any questions, I'll be down here packing up. Other than that, thank you so much for hanging out tonight. See you.